What's going on, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? Happy to talk some football with you here in the steamy first couple weeks of June.
Whew. It is getting hot, and it's not getting hot in the NFL world because they're on that hiatus. We only have a few more weeks, though, until training camp comes. And I sent you this image. Let's get this show started off on the right foot. Television broadcast numbers. I have to be honest, some of these get skewed because now with streaming numbers, and this is where the NFL is talking about how the next time they go into deals with these entities, whether it's YouTube TV for the Sunday ticket, whatever the case is, streaming numbers are going to adjust and it's going to change all these numbers. However, if you look at the last 5 years, this was from Warren Sharp. I sent this to you via text and I found it on Twitter. The last 5 years, the top 100 broadcasts by year. Okay. In those top 100 TV broadcasts over the last 5 years, the NFL, it's incredible how many they have on this list in the last 5 years. The NBA, 0. So what was your first thought about this?
I think you said the number was that 356 NFL games have landed on that list of most viewed programs and 0 NBA games. And Sunday night was the Game 7 of the NBA Finals. You would think a Game 7 is going to draw big numbers, but then again, it's Oklahoma City against Indiana. How many Americans could name several of the starters for either one of those teams? I think it's very few. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander kind of emerged as a star, but most people didn't know him before this season. Most people couldn't name more than maybe 2 members of the Indiana Pacers. I think the NBA is not a great television sport, or it's not as good as football. Football is a phenomenal television sport because you can incorporate so many things into it. And there's the betting, and there's the analysis, and there's the whiteboard, and the X and O's, and people love that stuff. It's also once a week. Football plays one time a week. I think the NBA suffers from just the saturation effect. 82 regular season games, 4 7-game playoff series. It's just too much. There's too much of it. It doesn't feel special. You get to Game 7 of the championship series, and it should feel like the Super Bowl. It doesn't. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons. It's just because the NFL has done a great job of making its product special by limiting the number of games.
It's also almost freaking July. How are they still having basketball games? It's same with hockey. Hockey just wrapped up last week as well. They've got to find a way to not, the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup. Do you know how difficult it is to maintain ice in Florida in the late June? It's incredible. Like, players talk about this, how difficult it is. But let me clarify what Warren Sharp said, that in the top 100 broadcasts of 2025, he was curious if Game 7 of the NBA playoffs will land itself and crack the top 100. And so in the last 5 years, so now we're looking at 500 broadcasts, the NFL has 395 that cracked that top 100 out of those 5 years, with the NBA not even going to having one. And he shared the image for the top 100 most watched U.S. broadcasts of 2024. Okay, so the number one is the NFL, probably the Super Bowl. Believe it or not, there's a lot of political programming involved in this. So a lot of people watching politics. College football has a lot of this. The World Series wound itself into 84th. The Summer Olympics were 82nd and also 89th, depending on the event. Women's college basketball actually came in at 76th in 2024. And my guess is in 2024, that was probably something to do with Caitlin Clark. And maybe it was Iowa LSU, which I think was a game in the March Madness. But that's just incredible to think that a women's college basketball game cracked the top 100 in 2024, but no NBA games. And I'll be honest, Coach, it's not just about the time of the year. For me, I think the product sucks in the NBA anymore. I'll go back to when I was younger. I was born in 1983. Clearly, in the 1990s, I was watching a lot of people say it was the golden era of the NBA in terms of Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley. You had the Admiral down in San Antonio with the Spurs. It was just a really awesome time to watch basketball. I have no interest. It's more like watching soccer to me. Like there's a lot of flopping going on. It's really, really tough to watch. And I don't think they have the superstars anymore. And so when you look at the NFL, oh my gosh, there's superstars everywhere you turn. So my question for you, is this more of a league-wide issue that the NBA is not propping up their superstars because the NFL does a tremendous job doing that? Or do you just think it's the nature of the beast and that the NFL is this monster and the NBA is just kind of like the little brother?
I think it's both. I think the NBA right now has a star problem. Their biggest name guys are aging out.
Yep.
Guys like LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard and Kyrie Irving, and they're at the end of their careers. The current biggest names in the game are guys like Luka Doncic, and Jokic in Denver. I mean, they're these Europeans whose game hasn't really found a massive American audience just yet. And then the new stars, the league hasn't marketed them and the public doesn't know them that well. Again, I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he just won the scoring title, the MVP, and the NBA championship. He's one of only like 4 or 5 guys to do that in the history of the league in 1 year. He could probably walk through the supermarket in most towns and most people wouldn't know who he was. The only reason they'd look at him is because he's tall. So that's a problem. And the other thing, my son, who loves basketball, absolutely basketball and football, his 2 favorite sports, loves basketball, doesn't like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the reason you just said. He said, Dad, he's just a flopper and he gets every call. And you're watching the NBA Finals Sunday night, and TJ McConnell, who's a try-hard guard on the Pacers, is getting clobbered and no calls. And then, I mean, man, you breathe on Alexander and he's on the foul line. That kind of, disconnect in the way that the game is officiated is a problem for the league. So I think the NBA, yes, they've got some issues to clean up.
I think, too, look at college football. If I were to go back and look at that list that I just had in front of me, there were a lot of college football games that found their way onto the top 100 in 2024. I'm looking at this and saying, I didn't see any college basketball, women's. There was no men's college basketball. So is this a basketball versus football thing when it boils down to brass tacks?
It could be. Basketball's also got that one and done problem.
True.
Right? Duke had Cooper Flagg this year, who was a big name and earned a big following, but he's gone. He'll be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, and then you're going to have to acclimate yourself to a new cast next year. There's no permanence there that allows you to grow an attachment.
All right. Enough basketball talk. Let's talk about. Man, everyone's talking about basketball. I'm talking about golf, man. That Travelers Championship was amazing, but that's neither here nor there. Let's go to our second topic. Jair Alexander, last time we spoke, he had not signed, and he did finally make a decision. He signed I thought it was a very team-friendly 1-year, $6 million guaranteed contract with the Baltimore Ravens. Could be up to $10 million in playtime incentives, things like that. The signing for him to return to his college teammate, Lamar Jackson, they're now on the same team once again. Does it make them the favorites in the AFC, in your opinion, Coach? I'll let you go.
I don't think that it makes them the favorites. I would say this. You could probably put Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City in a hat and just pick one of those names out, and there's a pretty good chance any of them have an equal shot to get to the Super Bowl. For me, those 3 are kind of all there together. If Jair Alexander didn't have the injury history that he did, I think that maybe this would give Baltimore a little bit of a leg up. They certainly have done a nice job of addressing some of their weaknesses from last year, but I don't know if it puts them over the top. I think that those 3 teams are the clear favorites in the AFC, and everybody else is going to have to chase them. But it's a great acquisition if he stays healthy. It undoubtedly shores up a weakness. But again, man, he's got a long injury history, and 17 games is a lot of football. He's got to get through it healthy.
Yeah, if he's healthy. And I've always said this. You get a guy like that, wow, team-friendly deal, Baltimore's got to be ecstatic. There's a reason Green Bay let him go.
Yep.
If he was that valuable, Green Bay's going to find a way to redo his contract or whatever it is to make him happy, to make him stay. But they let him go. They cut him. He was released. So maybe it is something with I think it's his knee. I think it's a knee problem that he's had, but he's also had other ailments as well. I think he had a shoulder 1 year. This guy has played sparingly the last 3 years. He has to stay on the field. And again, While Baltimore fans, trust me, I live in Maryland, they are just geeked out of their mind over this signing. They're ready to plan a Super Bowl parade, which I think is hysterical. Jair Alexander is going to have to prove it. And it's not just contractually that he has to prove it. He's got to actually stay healthy. And I mean, we've seen this how many times, Coach? Like, injuries can derail any great team season. And but I will say that if he does stay healthy, Jair Alexander makes the Baltimore secondary and by proxy their defense much, much better. They did figure things out midway through last year. If you recall, in the early stages of last season, their defense was awful, especially the secondary. And that was when they brought Dean Pease back in, and he was able to kind of get everything figured out with the first-time defensive coordinator. As a former player. Is it Zach Orr? Is that their defensive coordinator?
Yep, Zach Orr, yes.
So we'll see. Jair Alexander, I do want to ask you real quick, what do you think about the Jalen Ramsey trade now that Jair Alexander signs? Do you think he gets shopped before training camp, or do you think that's like a late training camp deal?
It's interesting. Tyreek Hill was all over social media over the weekend about we're keeping Jalen Ramsey in Miami, et cetera. And then Jalen Ramsey follows some of the Pittsburgh Steelers players on social media, and that gets everybody buzzing. If Jalen Ramsey gets dealt, whoever acquires him will have acquired a better player than Jair Alexander. He's older, but not significantly older. But his consistency and his level of play is higher. So that'll be very interesting. Let's say a team like the Steelers acquires Jalen Ramsey. Does that put them in the conversation now amongst the best in the AFC? Well, it certainly gives them an elite defense, and so a lot of those chips could really change where depending upon his destination.
I wrote the article for SteelCurtainNetwork.com about whether he fits with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I looked up his contract. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. They just restructured his deal. They added 3 void years to the end of his contract to help spread that money out. Whoever signs him, if there is a trade that happens, and I do think he gets traded, someone's going to have to work their magic with that contract, because taking that on, hey, from a player playtime standpoint, he makes sense for any team because he's that good. But from a contractual, financial, fiscal standpoint, there's a lot of reasons why you would say, we're just going to pump the brakes. We're not about to pull that trigger. So we'll see. Let's go to our third topic. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro announced last week that his administration will not support any state funding for private sports arenas or renovations to existing stadiums, which include Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh and Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. That would also include like PNC Park in Pittsburgh as well, for the Pirates play. I talked about this with Leslie Coleman last week. We were talking about the Kansas City Chiefs wanting to get some taxpayer dollars for their new stadium. Buffalo has done that in upstate New York and Orchard Park. Coach, what's your take on this? Do you support taxpayer dollars financing privately owned sports stadiums?
I really don't, to be quite honest with you. I recognize the importance of these stadiums to local communities. It's almost kind of like an eminent domain argument, that the public good is greater than the private need, and therefore the government should be able to participate in this thing or acquire it, whatever. But that money goes into the pockets of private citizens. I think about a guy like Daniel Snyder, who bought the Washington Redskins for a couple $100 million and sold them for several billion, I think $6 billion. I mean, that guy literally made billions of dollars off of that franchise and was by all accounts a terrible guy, a terrible owner, and somebody that I don't know specifically if he benefited from any kind of public funding or not, but conceivably could have. It feels as though this is a billionaires club, these guys who own these franchises. And I'm not saying all the money should come out of their pocket, but they should be able to put together an ownership group or some kind of a conglomerate that allows for these stadiums to get either constructed or the renovations necessary, etc. So again, man, for putting it on the backs of the taxpayer feels unfair to me.
I think it's a case-by-case basis. And so, in other words, if, let's say, the Pittsburgh Steelers, we'll use them as an example, if they want public funds to help build a new stadium, which that's not what they want renovations. If they want to build a new stadium, they'd have to submit some formal a proposal that's saying here is how it's going to actually be for the citizens. Now, Pittsburgh is rare. Heinz Field, formerly Heinz Field, when it was created, now Acrisure Stadium, it doesn't just house the Pittsburgh Steelers. It also houses the Pitt Panthers. It also houses the WPIAL state championship. They have the local teams play flag football there, the girls flag football. So it does get use outside of just the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is not a stadium that is only used for that professional entity. But the Steelers do want to put in some major renovations. Why should public state funds go towards that? Art Rooney II and all the minority owners, you want to renovate your stadium, save your money and do it yourself. I'm all about that. Now, the thing is, too, is I've also believed as a private citizen, why should let's say I live in, Northeast Pennsylvania. I don't even follow the Eagles. I don't like the Steelers. I'm closer to New York than I am anywhere else. Why would I want my tax dollars to go fund that stadium? Because it's a state tax dollar thing. I'm not about to get into my thoughts on taxes because that's a different podcast for a different time. But I think that people that are within the area, let's say you own a small business in downtown Pittsburgh or in downtown Philadelphia, you want that stadium to be there. Think about what's happening in Cleveland. They're threatening to leave downtown Cleveland and go on the outskirts of Cleveland. Think about all those small businesses, the bars, the restaurants that really profit from the Browns being in downtown Cleveland. It's a dump of a town either way, but still they benefit from it. And so this is a tough point here because, like you said, there should be some type of, hey, you put your money together and figure it out on your own. But I also could see the local area, local taxes maybe going to help. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, your cheap shot at Cleveland was not unnoticed there. But just casually slipped in that it's a dump of a town, whatever. No, I agree with it. I agree with it. I think about Philadelphia, right? There's a lot of noise right now. Philadelphia, the way it's set up is the stadiums are all more out near the airport than they are center city. So you have the Phillies and the Eagles and the 76ers and Flyers. Those three stadiums and arenas are all together. And the Sixers and Flyers are making noise about wanting to build a brand new arena in Center City, just because they feel as though it would be a tremendous revenue generator for the city. Hey, that's great. That's great. But if you live in Pittsburgh, should you fund that? Right. I live in New Jersey. The Meadowlands, which houses the Jets and the Giants, is in New Jersey, but those teams are the New York Jets and the New York Giants. Should New Jersey taxpayers have to fund a stadium for teams that identify as New York football teams? I mean, those are tricky questions. Buffalo is 8 hours from New York City. Would you want to be a Buffalo fan funding arenas that are, that are essentially for New York City use? These are really good questions, and I have a hard time getting on board with the idea that taxpayers should be on the hook.
Is there any easy answer to this?
Well, the easy answer is essentially to treat these businesses like all other businesses are treated, right? If you own a corporation and you want to open up a new factory or a new campus somewhere, then that's going to be on you, and so. Maybe there should be some. I mean, is this a public good? I guess that's the question. Yeah, is football a public good? And are the benefits of that public good important enough to the well-being of the local economy to determine that taxpayers should contribute? Those are the key questions, and those are tough answers.
There are, and I'll say this too. Each state is different, but in the state of Maryland, they have a lot of grants, millions of dollars in grants for revitalization projects. So you talk about Philadelphia and the Sixers and the Flyers wanting to go back into downtown. Okay, so I'm sure there's some type of grant similar to that in Pennsylvania. Apply for that grant, see if you can get that, put that in towards it. I can say that where I live here in Western Maryland, we used to have a minor league baseball team. When minor league baseball kind of shrunk and the Major League Baseball said we don't need as many teams, we lost our team. They tore down the old stadium and they built a brand new one in downtown. Now, downtown is not a nice part of town, but they used revitalization grant money. They got they got a company to spend almost $10 million for the naming rights. It was basically a self-funded project. We didn't have to give a lot of our taxpayer dollars for it. So there are ways around this. They just have to be creative. But At the same time, we'll see. These stadiums are going to get built either way. Either someone's going to get so pissed, like the owners, that they're going to say, you know what, screw you, San Diego, we're going to LA, which happened. Screw you, St. Louis, we're leaving. We're out of here. I hate when that happens. The Raiders have been bounced around so many times. It seems like they finally found a home in Vegas, but you hope it doesn't come to that. But this is not going away anytime soon, as these teams want to build these billion. What was the SoFi was like? Wasn't that like $3 or $4 billion to construct? Yeah. Insane.
Yeah. And that's where they have you. That's where they have you, with the threat of leaving.
Yeah. All right, we'll see. All right, let's go to our fourth topic. The Carolina Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard. He is from Edmonton and announced last week that he would like to play on Canada's national flag football team in the 2028 Olympics. If you were an NFL franchise, would you want your players involved in this? Well, this is interesting because the owner said, how many players per team? Is it 1 or 2?
Are allowed to participate?
Yeah, so it's maximum 2 players per team.
Yeah.
So my question remains the same. Chuba Hubbard is going to play for Canada. That's great. How are they going to field teams for all these countries? Where are they going to come from? Like, are you going to have a team from, I don't know, Greece that's going to be like soccer players that are just trying out football for the first time and they're going up against a Myles Garrett and TJ Watt? Like, how is that even going to look? I don't know. What do you think about this, Coach?
Well, first and foremost, if I were an owner, I would set a maximum limit of 0 players for my team, because this feels like a recipe for disaster. And we've seen guys tear their ACLs in the Pro Bowl flag football activities and those types of things. You know, this is tricky business, because yes, you're representing your country. I get that part of it. And the Olympics is probably a really cool experience for these guys. But flag football is not real football. And to get you injured doing that would be devastating. I think that you're probably going to have some teams that are competitive, because if all you are doing is playing flag football and you're taking the physical nature out of it, the Myles Garrett types are essentially nullified.
Right.
And so teams are going to be able to put together these guys who are specialists, and they'll probably be able to hang with whatever American team, unless of course it's just a bunch of, it's Jaden Daniels and Justin Jefferson and those guys. Nobody's
That's what
hanging
I'm saying, man. There's not going to be a hang with that. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but are you letting Jaden Daniels or Justin Jefferson play flag football in the Olympics? Hell no. I don't know if you can ban them from doing it or not. Can you write it into their contract? I don't know.
I think that's what you're going to see, Coach. I think you're going to start to see more people, when they sign new contracts, there might be a stipulation on what they can do outside of the realm of their contract, which their contract, in Jaden Daniels' case, is with the Washington Commanders. It might say you cannot play for any other team, any other country, any other activity that might be a detriment to this contract and you. And if you do, it could nullify the contract. And if you get injured, we can just walk away. So if Jaden Daniels does play, plants his leg wrong, tears all the ligaments in his knee, then the Commanders can say, all right, good, you're done. Like, the guaranteed money is gone. Like, they could actually write that in there, but they haven't yet. So what are they going to do? They can't do anything. You can't tell a Tyreek Hill that he can't do it unless it's in his contract, which I don't think those stipulations are in this.
No, not yet anyway. You want the world's best athletes on that stage, that Olympic stage. But at the same time, this is not real football either. That's where I guess I struggle to see the attraction, other than maybe you feel called to represent your country in the Olympics, and because they don't have actual football, this is the closest thing. It just strikes me as so reckless, because there's a lot of injuries in flag football, believe it or not. I hate 7-on-7, which is essentially flag football. And I hate it because I am terrified of the injury risk. I believe it develops bad habits. That's another conversation. But it's the idea of these kids without helmets on, without full pads on, flying around, mimicking the actions of the greater game that really worry me, because of all the chances that you have for a devastating injury. I've seen it happen, man.
I'm curious if at least the first few cycles of the Summer Olympics, will it resemble the first Dream Team? Because if you remember the first Dream Team that they put together, I mean, that was one of the greatest basketball teams, if not the greatest basketball team ever assembled. They could have shot only with their offhand and still dominated the entire tournament.
Opposing teams were getting autographs from them.
That's what this is going to be like to start. So if you have Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels, these are two quarterbacks, and then you have, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase out there. I said this on another podcast. They could just have LSU players go out there and they would probably find enough to win the gold medal.
Oh, easy.
It's probably just going to be like a walkthrough for them, but eventually, just like with the basketball, other countries are going to pick up. They're going to find their own athletes that specialize, like you said, in flag football. And it might become more competitive. I don't think it's as huge of a threat to start. I played adult league flag football, which is not what they're talking about, but it was more like tackle with flags. If they couldn't grab your flag, then you just got tackled to the ground and then they pulled it. If that's the case, well, now we're talking about something different. But I have a feeling that the actual flag football rules will be a little bit more stringent when you're talking about professional athletes. But I have no problem with it, to be honest with you. The player has to know the risk involved. And the owners have to be smart enough to say, if you're going to do this, this could be the repercussions. And so they'll have to figure that on a case-by-case basis. But we have some time, not until 2028. Let's go to our fifth and final topic before our profile. The last time, this is incredible. So if you look at this century, how many times have these teams had an all-pro quarterback? The Minnesota Vikings, San Francisco 49ers, Miami Dolphins, the Washington Redskins /Commanders/football team, the Bengals, the Chargers, and the Steelers. They've never had one. That is incredible. I think the last time the Steelers was like 1978, something along those lines. That's an all-pro quarterback, not Pro Bowl, an all-pro. So to clarify, all-pro, that's one AFC, one NFC, correct, Coach? Like it's just one quarterback.
Correct.
Which team is most surprising to you on that list?
Many of them are surprising.
Yeah.
It's the Chargers, though, that jumped out at me because it feels like they've always had a really good, if not great, quarterback. You had Dan Fouts way back in the day. You had Phillip Rivers forever there. You have Justin Herbert now. They always seem to have high powered offenses, explosive offenses. And that was shocking to me. Like I was like, really, the Chargers? I mean, I feel like the Chargers just show up and score 30 points, and they haven't had a Pro Bowl quarterback. The Steelers have only had two true franchise quarterbacks in their entire history. You had Terry Bradshaw, you had Ben Roethlisberger. It is kind of shocking that Roethlisberger never made All Pro in his long career. That is kind of shocking. Washington is a team. I mean, I know they've had a long struggle throughout in the 20th century. And so Jaden Daniels, I would imagine, is going to break their streak. It feels like he's bound to be an all-pro at some point. But they're not they didn't surprise me. Miami's had some really good offenses. You think about Miami quarterbacks and you think, oh wow, they've had some really good ones, but there are some really shocking teams on that list.
Well, I think that for me, I look at it and say Pittsburgh. Ben Roethlisberger was unfortunately born at the wrong time. It was in the era of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, both AFC quarterbacks for the vast majority of it. Well, Peyton Manning for his entire career, Tom Brady until he went to Tampa Bay for the last few years of his contract. I mean, he was drafted with Phillip Rivers, and these were just unbelievable quarterbacks. And so it's not that Ben Roethlisberger maybe wasn't worthy of it from time to time, but man, like that's just tough. And when they only pick one quarterback, I got to think that there are some. Minnesota. Did you say who you think Minnesota would have been for theirs?
Well, I don't. They had guys like they had Warren Moon at the end of his career.
Randall Cunningham.
They had Randall Cunningham. A little bit later on in his career, but that's not a franchise I think that has distinguished itself at the quarterback position, at least in a long time. You'd have a hard time as a casual fan of naming a bunch of great Minnesota quarterbacks since Fran Tarkenton.
Is Dante Culpepper on that list of great quarterbacks?
Yeah, he just didn't have the longevity,
I saw a video of him. He's huge. Like he's even bigger now than he played, and he was a big boy when he played. So that was an interesting statistic there. We'll see if that may change in the future. I don't think the Steelers have to worry about that anytime soon. All right, let's go to our profile of Fred Smith. Coach, I'll let you talk about Mr. Smith.
Yeah, Fred Smith passed away over the weekend, 80 years old. I think he's probably best known as the founder of FedEx, Federal Express. Every time I think of FedEx, I think of the movie Castaway, one of my all-time favorite movies. But he's also integral as part of that Washington ownership group that got Dan Snyder out of there. And I think if Fred Smith had a great contribution to football, it's not the fact that his son, Arthur Smith, is an NFL offensive coordinator. It's the fact that they were able to rid the game of the scourge that was Daniel Snyder. And you know what I've read about Fred Smith, he was a humanitarian, contributed to a lot of worthwhile causes, used a lot of his money for positive or put it towards positive venues. So that Snyder era, I think, is such a black mark on the game of football. So it's nice to know that, you know, that ownership group was able to get in there and finally remove him.
Yeah, I mean, when I was came to the area where we're closer to the DMV, and that is the district, Maryland, Virginia, for those that don't know. And that's right where you're talking about Redskins, now Commanders country. It was always FedEx Field. And then recently they dropped the naming rights there. And I don't know if anyone has claimed it, that field. You talk about wanting a new field. I'm pretty sure that my taxpayer dollars are paying for the RFK site. They're going to redo a stadium. But FedEx Field, although it's pretty new comparatively speaking, that's a dump. That is a dump. That's the field that I forget who it was walking off the field. It might have been Jalen Hurts, and the barricade or the railing fell. Dude fell down. Like, just scary stuff. But yeah, rest in peace to Fred Smith. And obviously, I'm sure his son Arthur Smith is, I don't know if it was sudden. Did you hear about cause of death or anything?
I did not. No.
I didn't either. All right, Coach, it's been a good show. Why don't you plug your Call Sheet Daily? What's coming up this week?
Yeah, so tomorrow's show, Whiteboard Wednesday, got to have a really good guest on, Jim Melody, head football coach, Cedar Creek High School here in New Jersey. Jim took them on a 14-0 run to a state championship 2 years ago. That's a great high school. They've produced a lot of stellar athletes. The Melton brothers, Bo Melton and Max Melton, both of whom are in the NFL right now, are Cedar Creek alums. And Jim's always got a really high-powered offense, and our topic's going to be creating explosive plays in the passing game. So any Steelers fans out there, you might want to listen, because that's not something that Pittsburgh's been able to do very often. Maybe Jim will have some great tips for us.
Jeez. Why don't you just rub salt in the wound, Coach? Come on now. All right, this has been a great show. Make sure you check out all of our shows on the FFSN NFL feed. I'll be back tomorrow with The Way We See It with Wesley Coleman. But in the meantime, check it out. Otherwise, we'll talk next week, Coach. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.